Aloha, folks, and welcome to this edition of Five Questions. It appears right now on News Radio 830 KHVH, but also log on to hawaiireporter.com and take a look and listen to Five Questions there. For friends of the morning show here on KHVH Radio, he's a voice that's very familiar, and he's a gentleman that we, well, to be honest with you, we just appreciate ever so greatly for his thoughtfulness and opinions, insight, and we always walk away being educated. He is the founder of DuffySoapbox.com, and from Washington, D.C., it's Chris Coughlin. And Chris, thanks for being with us.
Oh, my pleasure, Rick. Thanks for having me.
Well, Five Questions, that's exactly what the name of the interview is, the conversation. So I'll start with question number one, Chris, and it's kind of a Chris Coughlin 101. If you could tell us about yourself, for instance, where you were born, your parents, school, work experience leading up to Duffy, that'd be great.
I appreciate that. Well, I have a very much a Forrest Gump kind of life. I was born and raised in the suburbs of New York City. Two parents, working class folks, worked very hard to get me through school. And I can say that I've always had a love and a passion for politics. I've been a member of the UAW. I worked as a part-time worker in college for the UAW, so I can say I was a union member at one time. Mm-hmm. But my passion was in politics, and so shortly after school, I left. I'd worked on Wall Street, and I left and moved to Washington, D.C., joined a political campaign for the Bush administration, and started a career where the nexus is between trade and politics and policy and business, dealing in international issues and whatnot. Served through the first Bush administration and then took a leap and went into Asia, lived and worked in Vietnam for 4 years, one of the first companies to actually go into Vietnam, helped found the American Chamber of Commerce there, and came back and worked in the United States again, working for the second Bush administration, again in international trade. Throughout all this period, I was always interested in giving the word around about what was going on in Washington, and found a lot of people didn't necessarily understand all the ins and outs of how Washington works. That's the genesis of Duffy. I started it when I was at the American Chamber of Commerce, providing background for people so they could understand some of the decisions that were going on. Started out as a fax and is morphed into a website now, and it has been up and running now for more than 3 years. It's a little bit different than most stuff that you see on the web. I try to get a little deeper. I try to be more fact-based, question some of the assumptions. And it's been great success so far. It's led me in different directions, meeting new people. I'm very happy to have it up, and I'm glad people are tuning in to listen.
Excellent. Appreciate all of that, Chris. Question number two, because your opinion is based, as we read, on you attribute your commentary very well and the insight and conclusions. So I'd like to get your take on a couple things with question number 2 through 5. First of all, your analyses of media and politics and this alliance.
Well, I think that part of the reason why I do Duffy, the reason why it's written the way that it is rooted in the idea that most of the media that you have today, the media that's accessible through non-pay stations and some of the pay cable stations, is really news that's slanted or it's already been pre-cooked with a certain outcome. And I think that it's important to have a different view. I think it's important to go back and question assumptions on this. We do have a media culture in the United States right now where it's highly partisan. And even worse, I think, is you have partisans, particularly on the left, who pretend to have no bias. And in fact, they do have a bias with regard to who they support. I think that the latest statistics show that upwards of 90% of journalists vote for the Democratic Party. It's not a bad thing. It's just something that people should know about when they're looking at reporting. And I think it's something that average voters need to take into account when they're thinking about the news they receive and the positions they're looking at and who they're going to vote for.
Yeah. There has always been this take. Can you maybe describe for us, as part of question number 2, the genesis of liberalism inside of a newsroom? Statistical data tells us that approximately 93% of those surveyed identify themselves as liberal. And why is there such an overreaching number of liberals in news organizations today?
That's a really good question. I think that there are just a sense of some of where you go and you find collections of where people are ideologically positioned, you'll find that a majority of folks in academia and in news production tend to be liberals. I don't know necessarily why they congregate in those professions, but it is an ability to influence the public debate, to have an impact on public policy. And so you do find that folks in the news media generally will have a more liberal bent, and it has a really big effect on the way that we view the facts as they come out from Washington, D.C., because it's a filter that skews some of the truths that come out in a very, very liberal direction.
And just a quick sidebar. I know that you have experience as an instructor and also teaching in collegiate atmosphere. Were you at Georgetown teaching?
George Mason University.
George Mason, my bad. George Mason. Did you pick up on any indication of the faculty? Because I've always advanced the idea it's the faculty that imbues this particular viewpoint into the minds of young kids as they begin their college career.
Well, I wouldn't. I think that's accurate. That particularly, different subjects have different results, but you'll find a liberal bent with regard to how people are educated, and I've seen that in not just to single out George Mason, but I've had opportunities to interact with faculty and academia through my various political appointments, and you'll generally see that the people who are educating our young kids don't approach the material with a factual basis where they leave it up to the student to figure out how they feel about those topics, but they actually approach it with a conclusion. I think it's a bad way to teach. I don't think it's the wrong way to educate folks, but it is the way where you come at some of the activities with regard to President Obama's 2008 campaign can be rooted in some of the things that people in university are hearing today.
Talking with Chris Coughlin, and he is the author of DuffySoapbox.com. And learn more about Chris at Duffy. And we continue with this edition of 5 Questions with question number 3. And it's about conservative versus liberal political policy. And what are the differences between the two, the core differences? And is there anything to the sentiment that some express that at the bottom line, the end of the day, there really isn't a great deal of difference between the two?
Sure. I think that really the pivotal difference is that conservatives generally are gained toward empowering people, individuals, by giving the most choice at the most local level to the individual, where Democrats or liberals, progressives, are much more interested in empowering government and government programs to enforce a sense of social justice, and in a sense using government as a vehicle to try to leverage outcomes and level outcomes, where conservatives are interested in the equality of opportunity, liberals are interested in the equality of outcomes. And that runs through all of our policies and politics. I know sometimes it occurs or it seems as if we are at a place where all of Washington is dysfunctional and it's all the same at the end of the day. But these distinctions do matter. They do come out in the policies that you see from, for instance, 2009 through 10 with a United Democratic Washington, D.C., and it does matter at the end of the day. It's not just a montage of policies. There are policy directions that we can go, and so therefore it does matter if people get involved, get informed, and actually go to the polls and vote.
Talking with C-Square Chris Coughlin with this edition of 5 Questions, and leads us to question number 4. In your mind, Chris, what is the greatest threat to our nation today?
I think, honestly, based on where we are, it really is a matter of dealing with our financial system. I think financial collapse and the debt are really the main issues, not just for today and dealing with the fact that we're in a slump economically, but you're looking at a financial system that has so much debt that we are really we're going to have a massive impact on our children and their children by putting on their shoulders so much debt that they have to deal with. That you're looking at diminished prosperity in the future. The first time, really, I think, in American history where the next generation is not looking forward to a brighter, more prosperous America than we had before.
I concur, and a lot of folks would immediately say that it's a threat from terrorists who would do us harm. And again, that is a very real threat. But if we don't have our own foundation, we don't have our own rigidity in taking care of ourselves, how in the world are we going to be able to take care of others and be able to flourish? And I think you're absolutely right. The pillars could collapse all around us, couldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. I mean, obviously, a terrorist attack in the United States is a major threat. It remains one. But it's an element of an overall whole. And, as you look towards our military power, the threats we have overseas, how we take care of our people here at home, how we create opportunity for them, it all comes back to the financial system. How do we support the military with robust forces through our tax dollars? How do we make sure that we are actually paying for the things that we need? How do we create an economy that will be dynamic and create jobs? And how do we pay down this massive debt that we have? And really, you have to come back in each case to the financial system that undergirds all of this.
We're talking with Chris Coughlin, and again, Inside the Beltway with DuffySoapbox.com. Be sure and log on every day, and you can hear Chris as a regular guest on KHVH Radio, both Monday mornings at 6:35 and also on Saturdays on the Rick Hamada weekend at 12:30 p.m. here locally, and now right here on HawaiiReporter.com. So the final question, Chris, is this. We're in the campaign season, of course, with the GOP and a series of debates. To a T, obviously, they want to replace Barack Obama. If the GOP is not successful in 2012, can you describe what America would be like with a second Barack Obama administration?
That would be, obviously the $64,000 question we're trying to figure out right now. I think the one missing component in a Barack Obama victory in 2012 is what the composition of Congress is going to look like. And right now, at least today, given the number of Senate seats that are up, it would look like if the president has returned to office, it's going to be a united Republican Congress. There'll be a Republican Senate with Mitch McConnell as majority leader and John Boehner returned as speaker. And so you're looking at a policy or at an atmosphere. It's very much what we have going on right now today, where we have a president committed to a very progressive agenda and a very conservative Congress committed to less spending, limited government, and trying to reduce the debt. And I don't necessarily see a lot of compromise coming out of this. The president hasn't really articulated an agenda for his second term. He hasn't actually really defended the accomplishments of his first term. So I think that what you'll be looking at with the second Obama term is a lot of gridlock, which means these core problems that we have that we need to solve with the debt, deficits, creating jobs, modernizing our infrastructure. We're not going to be taking care of our tax code. We're not going to be in a position to do that if Barack Obama wins a second term.
And just as a sidebar to that, because I think it's a companion question, as this campaign goes ahead, what is, in your opinion, the greatest myth that's being perpetrated by Barack Obama, his administration, and those that would like to see him reelected?
Right now, I would probably say the position of Democrats and progressive with regard to the Tea Party. The idea that this is an extreme group, that they are racists, that they are intolerant. You can go around and look around the country, and you can see the Tea Party groups, and none of this is true. It's been going on now for 2 years, more than 2 years, since the Tea Party was founded. The idea that Republican ideals and values, as articulated by the Tea Party and adopted by Republican candidates, are somehow out of the mainstream. Actually, I think if you look at the American history and you look at where we are in the last 10, 15, 20 years, it is Barack Obama's agenda since 2009 that is outside the mainstream, not the Tea Party and not the Republicans that are going to be running for office this coming or next November. It
is always a pleasure to talk with Chris Coughlin from Inside the Beltway at DuffySoapbox.com. You can check out Chris right here on News Radio 830 KHVH and also now on HawaiiReporter.com. Chris, thanks so much for joining us, and thank you for being a part of 5 Questions. My name is Rick Hamada. Many thanks, and we'll see you next time.